Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Collider Interview Studio at Fantastic Fest 2023. Right now, I get to talk to someone who I've been dying to talk to since I saw the movie Fixation, which you should all hit social media, hit the internet, tell the world you want to see that movie because it's beautifully shot, as is the creator by cinematographer Oren Soffer. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished thus far. And
Thank you.
You're getting all the praise you deserve.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet. You've been very kind and supportive, and I appreciate it. I'm excited to chat. Been excited to chat with you.
I'm very excited. So we obviously have to talk about the creator, but I do want our audience to get to know you a little better first. And I love asking this in terms of starting one's journey in the industry. What was the movie you saw, the personal experience you had, person you met, you name it, that first inspired you to say, I need to get into the film industry?
Well, the story starts from before I have fully formed memories, but I have a core memory of Yoda wiggling around in the hut in Empire Strikes Back, wiggling his little puppet butt. And that image is seared in my brain. And I think I must have seen that when I was 2 or 3 at daycare. Somebody put on Empire Strikes Back, or it was on TV, on TBS or something. And I just soaked it in and then immediately became obsessed with Star Wars and sought out the original films. My uncle had a Laserdisc player. I watched them on Laserdisc. The special editions came out in 97, and that was a seminal moment. Big Star Wars kid, big dinosaur kid. Jurassic Park was huge.
The right answer.
Jurassic Park was huge. Massively important movie. And then, so when the special editions came out, the VHS box set, which I still have caked in dust somewhere.
So do I.
And I can't watch it. But it came with a CD-ROM. That was an interactive behind the scenes of the making of Star Wars. And it has all the footage we've seen subsequently. There's Empire of Dreams, I think it's called, the documentary that was on the DVD later.
Yeah.
So it's all using the same materials, and it's all the initial industrial light and magic stuff, the shots of the green screens, the ships, the models. That was switch number 1. And then switch number 2 that kind of closed the circuit was Lord of the Rings, special editions, the appendices, on the special edition box sets. I inhaled those, and this was now middle school, high school, so I was a little older and a little bit more I'm seriously I don't just love movies, I actually want to make them.
Yes.
I see the process of making them. That looks cool. I want to be a part of that. I was always into visual art. I was painting and drawing as a kid, and I picked up photography, and my friends and I would make silly movies on camcorders in middle school. So it all ended up funneling into cinematography and filmmaking. So
many follow-up questions because you made those silly movies. What were those movies about? And do you find yourself still drawn to those kinds of stories now as a professional cinematographer?
Somewhat, yes. One of them was about a briefcase heist, and it was a crazy, wacky visual comedy. We did all these gags. We made a stuffed person out of just clothes and stuffing and cotton. And one of the gags was that as the characters are sort of escaping from one another, one of them accidentally falls off of a 20th story balcony. So, we filmed the first part of it with our actor just sort of pretending to go over, and then we cut to a shot from the street. Yes. And we drop the dummy from the balcony 20 stories down onto the ground. And I still have a copy of that film somewhere, scanned in low resolution from, mini DV.
That should be a DVD bonus feature on the creator. And it should be look at where I started and look at where I am now.
It would be one of the saddest versions of that example.
I will tell you, not that I make movies anymore, but my very first assignment in grad school in directing class was one of the saddest things in the world. And at the end, it won worst short or something in the whole damn.
Why would they even have a prize for worst?
I got better.
We do get better.
I think it was done to well reflect how one could grow in a program, because if you watch my first and last, it shows the value of something like that.
That's good. Yeah. I can see the value in that. But
I appreciated that.
Yeah. No, I think I was kind of always drawn to genre-y stuff, heists and I don't know, robberies and westerns. And we did like a fantasy film in high school that was this whole like this guy steals the scythe from death, and it was, I mean, it sounds insane when I describe it because it was, and this was like a high school movie, so it was very low quality and those were the early explorations for sure. And I think there's a direct line from there to now.
So you decide you want to be a professional cinematographer. Yeah. At that point, when you made that decision, what did you think was step one to making that dream a reality? And now having done it, would you give that first step as a recommendation to somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Great question. I mean, I think first step for me was just starting to educate myself. And I lived in Israel at the time, so I was like about as far from this as one could be, certainly as far from Hollywood and Los Angeles and the American film industry, but kind of always dreaming about it. And I grew up in the States as a kid, so I always had sort of one foot in both cultures. And I obviously, English is my first language. I'm not in here with an Israeli accent or anything, but so I think that helped me keep my mind a little bit on like, I'll go back to America and work in movies one day. But yeah, so while over there, we had a filmmaking class in high school, which was very special and very lucky.
I wish.
Yeah, I know. Very, very fortunate. I mean, it was scrappy. This was 2003. We were shooting on literally VHS, like a VHS camera with the full-size tape on which some of these movies that I just described were filmed. And one thing I always remember from that, and eventually we moved to mini DV, I was like, why doesn't this look like movies? Like, why doesn't this look like shallow depth of field, cinema lenses? Like, I didn't know anything about chip size, sensor size, digital cameras versus film, 35 millimeter film. I didn't know any of that. So I had to learn. And there were a few like very seminal books that I think every aspiring cinematographer eventually stumbles upon. There's like the 5 C's of cinematography, and Blaine Brown's book that's just called Cinematography, and a few others. So that was the beginning. And watching DVD extras. Yes. A lot of great stuff in the DVD extras. And this is all pre-YouTube. Like this, so none of the resources that are available now were available. I think it's a lot easier to self-educate now. But at the time it was, you had to look.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second step was going to film school. Which, so I went to NYU. I did.
Good choice. Good choice.
No, it was great. It was great. I mean, would I recommend it? It's an open question because it was great for me. Like it was very important because I was moving from a different country halfway across the world. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in America. Like I had to start from scratch. And I thought that would be the best way to do it. And it was, because you meet so many people, and like all my good friends are from NYU and all my closest buddies and people that I work with. So like it was really important, but also very expensive. And I don't necessarily think it's like a need.
I always talk about that with film school. Like one of the questions that I have a habit of asking, just to like further emphasize that it could be the right path for some, but not for others, is what is something you learned in that program that you still find yourself using all the time today? But then also, can you name something that all the schooling in the world never would have taught you when you hit your first professional set?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the case at NYU. Like, well, we had one professor, especially, I'll shout out Gordon Arkenberg. He taught a class called The Science of Cinematography that just blew our minds. And it was all about physics and optics and lensing and light spectra and like just mind-blowing stuff that I think is actually very important for cinematography. And that's like the perfect example of something you learn in a classroom setting that if I was just sitting in front of a physics book by myself, I would close it. Like, I'm like, I do not need to know any of this stuff, but you kind of do. So it's, that class was very seminal, and his influence, I think, is felt from like every cinematographer who has gone to NYU knows Gordon, took his class, and talks about that class. And then I think also film history. Like, I think I encounter a lot of younger DPs who don't watch movies or don't watch a ton of movies. And I'm always like, how do you talk to directors? Because directors speak movie. Yeah. Directors all watch a ton of movies and they know all the references and they reference specific movies and shots and film language. And if you don't speak that language, I'm like, I don't know how you work with a director, especially in narrative. Maybe it's different in commercials and music videos, but which I do as well. But so just studying film history is like huge. And obviously film school is just a great people can do it on their own. You have Criterion Channel, you got websites, you got blog. I mean, there's so many things. Just go down the Sight and Sound list and start from number 1 and go down to 100. But I get it. Like, it's hard sometimes to find the time and also to have the analytical mind to understand film language and analyze it and study it. So that was really great. But the one thing you don't get in school is just on-set experience. And so that was really the thing that you don't learn, especially on professional sets. Well, I mean, we would shoot a lot of student films, but there's only so much you learn on a student film. I mean, you learn how to make a student film very well on student film sets, but it doesn't always translate to professional shoots. But I was very lucky. I met Reed Morano sophomore year.
So good.
Yeah, and she's an alumni of NYU.
Were you in the program together at the same time?
She's 12 or more years older than me. So she did the program earlier in the 2000s, but she's an alumnus. So she came back to speak. And this was before famous Reed Morano. This was like indie Sundance Reed Morano.
I'm like picturing the shot of hers of Olivia Wilde in Meadowland walking through Times Square. And ever since I've seen that shot, I'm like, you are a name that I will always look out for.
My favorite shot of Reed is when she shot, I forget the name of the film, Little Bird, I think, or Little Birds. I'm terrible that I'm messing it up, but she was 7 months pregnant. And handhold operating a 35 millimeter camera. And she's got her eye in the eyepiece and her hands resting on her belly. And you see that and you're like, you were just one of the most badass people I've ever met. So anyway, she came to speak at NYU and was very fortunate. Well, it was me and one other kid. We knew who she was because we were well studied in cinema. And then we went and talked to her after the class. And she said, hey, yeah, I'm shooting this movie, Kill Your Darlings. Like, do you want to come help out on set? So I did 3 movies with her as a camera PA, like an intern. And that was my first professional set exposure. And now one can argue NYU is the reason that connection happened, which it was.
That's the thing. It's the community and connecting the dots.
It was. But subsequently, you know, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I met Greg Fraser and that all happened outside of that framework.
One of the best in the business. I have been obsessed with his work for a long time now.
Me too, as you could probably imagine. So he's been a huge influence and I've stolen a lot from Greg over the years.
How did you meet him?
We met at the ASC Awards, like completely randomly. Well, actually before that we were DMing on Instagram, which is just to say that. Did
you DM him?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe he saw like a short you made and felt inspired.
He might have. You know what? I don't exactly remember. Maybe I should tell myself that's what happened.
Because I am curious, like when you want to reach out to someone you admire like that, how do you even begin that conversation or build the courage to send the message to begin with?
You know, that's the thing is, I mean, I think that's the Israeli in me. There's like a little bit of chutzpah for sure. That is like, I don't know. What's the problem? Like, I'm just gonna reach out. I mean, I'm not even overthinking it. I'm just like, why wouldn't I? You know, this is what this platform is so great for, is like Instagram's here. We have access to all these people, like use it. And I encourage people to reach out to me all the time. I'll tell people like DM me if any questions you have, email, like whatever you have. And people do. And I'm always more than happy to answer and give back in that way.
Best thing in the world.
Yeah, because I just got really lucky with my mentorships and I'm like, I gotta give it back. Gotta pay it forward.
I was just talking to Sung Kang, who just directed his first feature, and he was busy singing Robert Rodriguez and Walter Hill's praises because they're so open with all of their knowledge. They're like sitting there eager to share it, just because by sharing it, we make films better in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Another great book that I read in high school, by the way, Rebel Without a Crew. Robert Rodriguez. He's written a few books about indie filmmaking. So yeah, I just soaked all those up. What is the other one? Yeah, Raging Bulls. What is it? Easy Riders and Raging Bulls. That's another good book.
Oh, what I would do to like see his space.
My God.
Right here in Austin.
It's here, right? Yeah. It's like, can we go? Can he make us some pizza?
DM him. Maybe he'll say yes.
Not a bad idea. I'll do it.
So we brought up Greg. Can you maybe give us a specific example of a technique that Greg taught you that we could see influencing your own work, whether it's on the creator or anything you've made thus far?
I think it's more a philosophy. Greg, I think, has always talked about, and I've always responded to, his use of single source lighting. And there's some quote that from an old interview of his that just was lodged in my brain for years, which was, he's like, when I walk into a space, a location, the first question that I ask myself is, can I shoot this scene without any lights? Like, is this giving me enough as it is to just set up the camera and start shooting? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to do it that way. Like there's no need to add and to gild the lily or put sprinkles on top of ice cream, as he also puts it. It's like, it's too sweet when you're adding things it's already good. Yeah. And then if you do need to add a light, then you start to ask yourself, like, can I do this with one light? And then you just slowly build it out from there. But it's always starting from this source of single source lighting, available lighting, natural light, and embracing that. And that's something that's always been very omnipresent in his work, and something that I've always responded to. I mean, somewhere along this journey, I also picked up still photography. So I've been taking a lot of stills, a lot of street photography over many, many years, like during travels and all that. And I don't do studio photography, like lighting or anything like that. It's purely just travel, street photography, from the hip, natural light. So I think that also has like ingrained itself in me for sure.
This is definitely going to come up when we start to talk about how you guys shot The Creator.
It all connects.
Like I love reading about how, you know, like light the crew and the gear was, and how you're able to move and be more fluid with everything because of it. But before I even get there, so Greg was meant to shoot The Creator.
Yes.
Dune 2 came up and he had to step out, and he recommended you for the job. When you found out and were offered this position, was it like, yeah, no brainer, I'm ready to make this leap to a major studio film? Or was there any nerves or apprehension, or maybe burning questions you wanted Greg to answer to make sure you felt comfortable?
Yes. Many thoughts were going through my head. The first one was, yeah, absolutely. And it's actually kind of funny. Greg, at first, when he pitched it to me, was like, I don't know if this is going to interest you. I know. He's like, this is a very weird pitch. The way we're setting this up is very unorthodox. And I'm going to explain it all, because he had been sort of developing this methodology with Gareth over a couple of years and planning about how to shoot the film. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't even know why you would start with that. Like, of course I'm going to say yes to whatever you're about to say to me. So like, you know, it's very considerate. I appreciate that he's that kind of person that thinks about that stuff. But I was like, of course it's a no-brainer. I did have many questions, most of which didn't have answers yet, which then became part of the, like, I just have to let go of the anxieties and the unknowns of this and just like jump in.
Can you give us an example of a question you had that didn't have an answer then, but you discovered the answer to along the way?
It wasn't clear when he pitched the project to me, and this was before official pre-production started, like the specific logistics of who's going to do the costuming, like we had all basically every aspect of this film is unorthodox.
Yes.
So one unorthodox aspect was the costuming, which a lot of people haven't talked about yet, but someone should reach out to Jeremy Hanna, the costume designer. He works at Weta, or he worked at Weta Workshop and has since left to work on other projects, but he's down in New Zealand. Also a young guy. I met him at the premiere, the special screening the other week. Amazing, like lovely guy. Never stepped foot on set, but he designed all the costumes with Gareth. Weta Workshop fabricated them and then shipped them to Thailand. So when I came on board the project, those were already well into production, and I saw all the images, all the concept art, the designs of the costumes, the look of them, and the physical props, the photos they took. So I was like, oh wow, I mean, this looks incredible. And talk about another connection to Lord of the Rings, the special features. The minute you find out, like, oh, Weta Workshop made the props and costumes for this, I'm like, that's just as crazy as Industrial Light and Magic doing the visual effects, and somehow I'm involved in this. Like, it's nuts. But anyway, we had the costumes, and then I was like, okay, who's putting them on the actors? Like, who's the costume designers in New Zealand? Like, what is the actual logistical process here of like how this is going to go? Especially because how it was described to me was like, you're going to be driving around Thailand in a van and hopping out on the side of the road and like shooting a scene in a village, and then hopping back in the van and like going to the next place, which is sort of accurate to how it ended up being, but it was just a bit of a bigger there were like 100 vans. It wasn't just one van. There was a lot. There was actually a big production footprint that supported the film. But I don't think even Greg knew what that would look like before we actually started pre-production, the hard prep in Thailand. But by the time we got there, it became very apparent how everything was going to work. And so all that anxiety and all that questioning went away. And I think part of that was like coming from indie films. You feel like you always have to ask those questions, like, okay, but like, how are we going to accomplish this? And how are we going to accomplish that? But the biggest thing I learned right away was like, you're in a different league now. People have got this. People have thought about this stuff, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about that stuff, the scheduling. I could just focus on what I need to do. And that was like a breath of fresh air.
You
honestly.
are in a different league with this film, but one of the most refreshing things about this production to me is that it's a big budget studio film, but one that doesn't overspend unnecessarily.
Yes.
Can you name something about the way you shot this movie that more big budget films should consider using because it is more cost effective, but it still produces a killer image?
Totally. I mean, I think well, first off, obviously visually, in terms of lighting, camera work, lensing, we made a ton of decisions that were all initially, I mean, first and foremost, designed to create an immersive and believable and tactile experience for the audience, but also embracing prosumer equipment and also things that allowed us to have that smaller footprint and create that look. Now, am I going to sit here and say like, well, every shoot should just use prosumer equipment? Not necessarily. But I think it's more the ethos and like the thought of starting from minimalism. And it goes back to that Greig quote. It's like, can I do this with nothing or with just what I have? There's a lot of just in case thinking on big budget filmmaking where you're like, well, let's just have all this stuff and all this crew and all this equipment just in case. But for us, it was really more about paring it down and saying like, no, we're going to narrow this down to just what we need. In order to accomplish this look. And it meant we shot on one lens, we shot on one focal length. We didn't carry a whole lens set. We shot on the small camera bodies, not a big footprint. We shot on, we expanded the scope of the production when we needed to. And like we had some night scenes that those do require more lighting. And there's some sequences where we used a bigger crane, but we day played that stuff. So we wouldn't actually just carry it all around with us. It just required more planning. I think the biggest thing though is just the innovative visual effects approach. Like that, the reverse engineering of it, which Gareth has talked about and explained, is I think the key to unlocking this budget level. And it's the same thing, like it requires extra planning and extra thought and keeping your production designer into post and just rethinking how you're approaching design. But the end result is incredible cost savings, but also like even more tactile and immersive visuals. But I mean, one example that I can give about the sort of overall approach is there's a shot in the movie that is also in the trailers, and it's a shot of an ambulance flipping over from the inside.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's not a spoiler to give it away because it is in the trailer. And so when you read a shot like that in a script, if you're, for example, the production designer, and not to even get into the lighting, which I'll get into, you read that and you're like, okay, so, or you're the stunt coordinator. You're like, all right, so we're going to have to build like a custom ambulance interior set, put it on a gimbal, put it on a stage, have it be able to roll in that way and put the stunt actors in there, rig them up, all just to get this one little shot. And Gareth immediately just goes, no, we're not doing that. We have a real ambulance that we're filming our exterior shots of the driving footage of the ambulance on, and our interiors of the characters that are in it. All we need for this shot is it's less than a second, and we just need to give the impression of the ambulance flipping over. So we did it in the old school Star Trek way. Ambulance is parked outside, so we don't need to light it. It's getting natural daylight. The camera is looking through the back, and we tented the back so that it didn't look like there was light coming in. And then we did a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and Gareth rolls the camera 90 degrees sideways, and the actors throw themselves into the air, and the props team are throwing some medical supplies in after them, and papers flying around, and that's the shot in the movie. So it's less like one specific thing, because that's one of like dozens of examples of just embracing that mentality and just saying like, that's all we need, like what's the quick scrappy way to do this? And I think that just blew my mind, and way more big productions could and should like embrace that kind of thinking and that kind of filmmaking. It's like very pure filmmaking.
Never in a million years would I have guessed you completed that shot that way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's other stuff people haven't tapped into and we haven't talked about yet, but there's like, we used a lot of projectors for stuff, like just from Amazon, like cheap projectors that just plugged into a laptop for some driving shots, and for some of the stuff on Nomad, there's like really lo-fi, scrappy solutions to things that would normally take like a lot of resources. And I think that's what makes the difference, is like that approach. And that, I love that stuff. Like that goes back to the movies I was making in high school. It was just like the silly.
I was going to say literally everything about, I'm glad we started where we did with this conversation, because it does feel like you held tight to what inspired you from the very, very beginning. And now we can see it reflected in your work, but also that same enthusiasm for similar things still there powering everything you do. And
absolutely.
I love it.
And Gareth still has that. Yeah. And Gareth's 10 or however many years older than I am. He is 12, and he still has that passion, and he's still just a kid making movies with his friends. Like, and on an $80 million movie, that makes all the difference. Is having
keep you here all day.
I got time. My flight's not till later.
No one gave me like an evil eye yet. I want to go back to Gareth, because I know he likes to operate sometimes. He's clearly has a very unique way of making his films. What is something about him and the way he operates on set and collaborates with his cinematographer that is purely him, unique to him?
Well, he operated pretty much this whole movie. So that was a big part of the initial design of how we were going to make the film, was to empower him to be spontaneous and reactive in real time to things that were happening. We're always fishing for those moments of genuine, like the things that are unplanned, and because those end up resulting in like the most interesting scenes or moments or little details. So it was all about giving him and the actors the space to explore and discover. And that was a big part of how we wanted to shoot the film. We lit the film based around that idea, and it was more about lighting a space. Greg has a great analogy where he talks about, like, it's like painting a house. Most of the work goes to, putting up the tape and moving the furniture and kind of mixing your paints and kind of getting everything ready. And once you've done all that work, which we did in pre-production with a lot of planning and thought, once you actually get on set, it's like the last 20% is just painting, and you just go for it. And you have the freedom to paint. You can start over here. You can start over here. Like, if you've done the prep right, you can start painting whichever wall you want. And that's how we designed the lighting of the film as well. It was like lighting the space and lighting the environments and creating basically like a little playground for Gareth and the actors to play with. So Gareth operated. Gareth's a great operator. And this wouldn't have worked if he wasn't. And this is also why this method would not necessarily work with every other director, because you have to have a director who's good at operating and has a good eye. And Gareth is, he just has good taste. He has great taste. He knows where to find the good lighting. He knows that if lighting is coming from this direction, like from a window, that if you come around to the other side, you're going to get the nice fall off and the nice contrast. Like, you don't need to tell him. He knows. He instinctually finds those angles and those situations. And he also has this very like Spielberg-y way of coming up with shots. It's like very simple tricks when you actually break it down, but it's all about like interaction between foreground and background, always having foreground depth as well as background depth, layers of the shot, starting on something in the close-up and then coming off of that and revealing something else, or following a character from one shot to another shot and making those connections. And he has like that instinct, that's that film language. Like, he's just steeped in film language and he just knows it instinctually. And it makes for like great shots, like very kinetic visual style that he just comes up with. Like, you don't have to force it. You don't have to overthink it. It's very gut reaction. And so it's just a pleasure to work with that.
I've always been a big believer that any filmmaker, no matter what your role is on a film production, can benefit from having a clear understanding of what the other jobs on a film set are. And it seems like he's the kind of person who not only has a good understanding of the other positions on a film crew, but like a good understanding of how to best support their work as well. And that is so vital to something like this in particular, coming together and feeling real.
He's a very unique director. I mean, I certainly have not worked with anybody even remotely close to this, and I don't know if I ever will, unless he calls me again for whatever his next film is after he takes a long and much needed vacation somewhere.
I think he has earned it.
He has very much earned it, and I think he's been fantasizing about it for a couple of years, but he'll get the vacation. But yeah, I mean, he's the kind of director who he'll sit in the van on the way to set, designing a graphic logo that's going to appear in the background somewhere, and he just does it himself because he's like, oh, the graphics department, they already have their hands full. Like, they got all this other stuff they're working on. Nobody's thinking about this tiny little logo but me. So like, I'm just going to do it. And he has a background in graphic design, and he has a background in visual effects.
We saw it with his first film. He gets it. Editing, he gets it all.
Yeah, it's all of it. So, but then he's not he's very collaborative. So that's what makes it work, is that he can do everyone's job, but he doesn't want to. And I mean, he knows that he can't physically do everybody's job because you have to do it all at the same time. It's not possible. And so he has such a clear vision and such a clear understanding of what everyone does. But what he does is he brings you in, and he brings you into his world and his mentality and his thought process, and lifts you up and says, like, I want your artistry in this, and I want you to understand what I'm going for here and pick up on what I'm putting down so that you can run with it. And my whole goal on set was like, he's dealing with so much. He was a producer on the project. He's operating the camera. He's directing the actors. I was like, I don't want to bother him. Like, if I can go a whole day without talking to Gareth, except like saying hi to him in the morning, that was a great day, because that means that mind meld that we worked on during prep and with Greg and everybody worked, and that I understood what Gareth likes and what he wants and what he needs, and that we gave him what he needed, and empowered him to create and to explore and to find the shots and moments.
For one reason or another, can you pinpoint the day where the mind meld needed on the spot adjustment, and whatever you were working on called for the most collaboration on the day between you and Gareth?
I don't want to sit here and rack my brain thinking of a specific example, because there's so many, but it was really just a constant dance between the two of us. Like, the way we designed the lighting approach for the film was that it would be flexible enough to react to whatever Gareth was doing spontaneously with the camera. So there were a few techniques that we employed in order to do that. One of them was just planting a few different lights around. And then I would sit at the monitor with my gaffer, P. Thai, who's a Thai-based gaffer from Bangkok, who's also a DP, excellent DP. And we would watch what Gareth is doing and then just react in real time. So like, if he starts to drift over to look in another direction, we have dimmers on all the lights, and we could just dim down the light that now is not looking so great and is looking a little bit flat. And Gareth doesn't even notice. He shouldn't notice that we're adjusting the lighting in that way. We also had our best electric, Nancy, rocking a LED light on a boom pole. So that was the get out of jail free card, that she was always on standby with that thing, and it was always ready. And whenever we just needed a little extra, like Gareth's up in a shot and we're like, we just need a little extra boost or a little extra wrap of the light, like just to make it perfect, we would call her in. We're all on wireless comms, and then she would just sneak in very quietly, and you know, Gareth would maybe feel it. And she had we put an iPhone on her arm, like with a workout armband, and she was able to see the shot in real time, like what Gareth was filming, so she could find her perfect position, and we would talk her into it. So yeah, like, it was every day was that dance, was we were reacting to what Gareth was doing, and Gareth's reacting to what we're doing and how we lit a space. So it was this mutual thing, but we wouldn't have to over communicate about it because it was just planned that way. And we would talk about these things on the scouts. So like, all this was already figured out by the time we would show up. We would come back to a location after 2 months, having scouted it, and been like, oh, we know what we're doing here. We already talked about this. We're going to do this, and this, and it just comes together pretty quickly. And we had Gareth mic'd up. This was the other thing I've never seen anyone do before, but we had Gareth on a microphone. So he was on a wireless mic that was picking up his monologue, and we all had him in our ear, the whole crew, the AD, the other department heads, everything. So whenever he needed something or would call out, or he would be able to say like, I'm going to drift over here and, you know, frame up this other thing. So we know where he's going to go. Or he would say like, oh, I'm going to start tilted up here, and then we're going to add a ship over there and tilt down into the shot, and we'll come off of that. We'll add that later. Like, he's giving himself VFX notes for later for the monologue. And then the best thing about it is he does sound effects. So, so we're, you know, set up in an action scene, and then he's like, pew, 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 like doing all the sound effects, which is very funny and, endearing, but actually serves a purpose, because it's about pacing. So it's about like the timing of certain shots. He's basically sound designing the movie in his head, like while we're shooting it and editing.
I mean, this to be a bonus. Like, I can't, as you started to explain it, I pictured or heard in my head, like the mic'd up thing that they do with football players. I'm like, I want a clip of this, but with Gareth running through a particular shot now.
We absolutely said on set that we should do an alternate sound mix that only uses Gareth's sound effects for the DVD, or the Blu-ray. And I really hope they follow through with that.
I would watch this in a heartbeat. All right.
Very entertaining.
I'm going to end with two big, broad questions. They're difficult questions because I'm going to make you specify particular shots in the film. But the first one, of all of the incredible work you deliver in this movie, which particular shot was the most difficult to accomplish, whether it's because it needed workshopping or because of some sort of technical feat that you've never tried before?
The most difficult sequence in the film is the tank battle. And it's hard to break it down into individual shots because they were all, it was all difficult. But yeah, that was the most remote location, the most physically difficult, the crummiest hotel, you know, like everything about it was hard. It was and not that I'm complaining about, you know, being flown around the world and put up in hotels, but some of them were very nice and some of them were not so nice. But yeah, it's a very remote part of Thailand. Beautiful. I mean, just stunning. Like, especially in the morning, the sun would come up over the river. There's mountains in the background that are actually Myanmar. We're on the border. And there's this town that straddles a river with this bridge. And it's all that stuff's there. Like all that stuff was practical. And just found. And we actually built the whole sequence around it. So that scene was storyboarded, but it was actually storyboarded to a different location. And we initially planned on shooting it in Cambodia, in Siem Reap in the floating village. But because of COVID and everything, we did not end up, we were not able to shoot in Cambodia, which was very sad. We scouted it, which was incredible. And that's another story. But yeah, so we sort of had to pivot away from the initial, we had done a lot of planning and we had to pivot on the fly, which was the nature of this film, and reskin the sequence onto this new location. So we hadn't scouted it. We hadn't scouted it in advance. We had a few days set aside for scouting before we started filming. And we went all around the town, looked at all the angles, where the town looked good, where the village had the best angles, what time of day, and basically just built out the sequence like as we were going. And then the shoot is like I was describing before. It's this very spontaneous, loose shooting style that Gareth has. So at any given point, you could be looking in any direction, at anything. You have to be ready. We had cranes, dollies, handheld, drones, 2 cameras at the same time. I'm operating the second camera, handheld, getting additional angles of a lot of this action, stunts, explosions, boats, real villagers from the village as extras in the film. I mean, it was just such a puzzle, and it's really gratifying to finish shooting it from a physiological standpoint, and then also extremely gratifying to see it cut together and with all the added VFX and sound design. I mean, it's just such a good sequence.
Stellar stuff. All right.
Yeah. And we had the monkey.
Oh, yeah.
In that sequence, which was a highlight for sure.
Yes.
Everybody loved the monkey.
I can understand that.
And everyone seems to like the monkey in the movie now,
Very much so.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. That monkey was a hoot on set. Very, very
good
funny.
Animal character will always win me over.
A brief story is that the monkey had a trainer, and he was being trained for months to do this shot to trigger the bomb, and the trainer would send us updates throughout the filmmaking of like the progress of the training, and with videos, and it would show like the monkey, and there would be captions. It was like, monkey not quite ready, like just hasn't quite got it down yet. But by the time we got to set, it was
yet
all
another
good.
thing that should be a bonus feature.
Oh, 100%. The animal trainer stuff was hilarious. But yeah, that was definitely the most challenging sequence.
A challenge well worth tackling right there.
Yeah, very much so.
All right, here's my evil question, because I'm about to ask you to choose your favorite child. If you could pick a single frame that you love the most in this movie, blow it up, hang it on the wall, which one would you pick and why?
Actually, not a difficult question for me to answer because I have a favorite shot
that.
in the movie. Yeah. It's near the end of the film.
Okay.
So I maybe don't want to fully spoil
tease.
It is a shot of a reflection of Alfie, and it is just such a beautiful moment, and it is the perfect encapsulation of everything I was talking about because it was not planned. It was one of those shots that you just accidentally stumble upon. And it was such a little moment of authenticity and accidental beauty and incidental beauty that you couldn't plan for. And that's what makes it so special.
I know what shot you're talking about. And
yeah,
it is beautiful.
It's very close to the end of the film.
I lie. One more question before I let you go. Just because like one of the most exciting things over recent years is, you know, I have fallen in love with Greg's work. And when I hear that he is mentoring a new cinematographer on the rise, I get very excited. So I kind of want you to pay it forward now. Is there any other cinematographer on the rise that, you know, could be the next you, could be someone that I should mark now and then follow their work into the future?
Yes. Check out Matt Bastos. I think he goes professionally by Matthias, which is his full name. Really great eye, really great instinct. And he's New York based for now, but, you know, a man of the world. And he shot additional photography on Story Ave, which is also coming out soon, that my buddy Eric Branco shot. Great film about the Bronx, beautifully shot. And he also has a bunch of indies in the can. I think he has one called Gazer that's coming in, hitting the festival soon. So he's very much at that, like, has the indies. They're starting to hit the festivals. It's like the first stage of that, but beautiful work, beautiful eye. And yeah, he's one to watch for sure.
I love it. I love it. And again, I love your work so much. It's phenomenal here in The Creator, but Fixation and anything else I've seen you deliver, really on point. I cannot wait to see what you do from here.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.